Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Myers, and I'm a programmer at SF DocFest, and I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with the filmmakers from the time of the Fireflies this afternoon, well, at least afternoon for me. So I guess first to kind of start us off, I'd love to have you all introduce yourselves and sort of the roles that you played in making the film.
Sure. So I'm Mateo, Robert Morales. I'm the co-director and cinematographer of the Time of the Fireflies.
My name is Mattis. I'm the co-director and composer of the film.
Great. Thank you both so much for being here. And I kind of wanted to start us off actually talking about sort of the cinematography and kind of the expanse of the film. I feel like there's a lot of wide shots, but a lot of just moments in general we're kind of able to feel the space of Miguel's home, but also how his home sort of feels in New York as well. And then thinking more specifically about the time that he and his mom were both on the phone with each other and we're able to see both ends of that conversation. And so I'm just curious first about how you sort of approached that and how you were able to be in these multiple places with them at once to really kind of illuminate their relationship for us watching.
Right. I think, first of all, I think one of the biggest challenges that we both faced when we started working on this film was the fact that we had to tell the story that happened in the past, that had happened already. So it was like, how do we make a film which is interesting enough? It's not only like voiceover describing like things that already happened. So it was trying to find a visual and a sonic language that could translate also the feeling that Miguel had of his faraway past and his present, and how his impression of New York and his hometown has changed throughout time. So, for instance, something that we try to do is the film Miguel speaks when he just arrived in New York. He says that he felt very overwhelmed and in a way oppressed by this huge city and like the cityscape. So we try to do that when he talks about that just arriving in New York, filming the city with like long focal lengths to try to give this impression, like compress space and translate that feeling of overwhelming that he was having at that time. And in the same way, Mexico, when he talks about his memories and his childhood, we try to film all of that with wide-angle lenses to kind of give this feeling of immensity and emptiness that he often talks about. So that was one of like the ways we wanted to play with this contrast, and we did similar things with the sound, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, in the way that we use the mic setups and the mixing choices we made were all about, again, translating the things, his testimony and the things he would share with us and his feelings towards these places. And so again, kind of playing with those recording techniques and mixing techniques to give a sense of immensity or feeling lost or feeling sort of overwhelmed or things like that. But to pick up on something Mateo was also saying, we wanted to use the visual and sonic language to also represent the change that happened over time, because his relationship to his home and his relationship to New York, which he to a certain degree also managed to conquer over time, really changes. And so over time, the representation of New York, which was in the beginning much more sort of overwhelming, like Mateo said, but towards the end starts getting a bit of space and bringing a bit the nature back into that landscape.
Yeah, towards the end of the film. So something we don't do at the beginning is we never film nature in New York. We focus really on the urban landscape, while towards the end, when Miguel feels more at home and more comfortable in the city, then we try to focus much more on like the nature. We even try to make references to the fireflies, like these small insects that we see towards the end. So that was kind of our way to translate what Miguel was expressing.
Just to finish off, maybe also the contrast, the really kind of enhancing and emphasizing the contrast between these two places, we thought would be because we were able to. I mean, Matteo grew up in the village, so he also obviously put a lot of his own experiences into filming that place, because it's his hometown. But we thought that having experienced these two places while filming, we thought that the contrast between these two places was a window into his reality and his experience of New York.
Yeah, I think those contrasts really come through, especially I rewatched it today and I really kind of noticed that much more today. And it really made me think about the sound design for some reason, especially felt really lush and very crisp, especially in those moments where you're back in Sabatitland and like actually um, with his family and thinking back those moments where he's kind of talking about the differences between his two places, and you really can hear like the hums of the fireflies and kind of like the crackle of fire and everything like that. So I really wanted to hear from both of you sort of about the sound design and how you approach that, whether that was in the process of actually recording the sound, but then after sort of looking back at what you had recorded, what you had filmed, and how they enhance the contrast of these two places, especially because there is such a connection to nature and mountains and sort of the space that he's afforded in Mexico that he didn't necessarily have right away in New York.
It's interesting you say this, that they felt very crisp, and I maybe it's also due to this impression that we had that all of his memories, even though they were like 12, 13 years away from his now reality, they felt still extremely real to him. And in his depiction and his descriptions of these moments, we experienced them as if it was happening. And so I guess we wanted to give some of that reality. The music was also something we like from the very beginning, since I'm mainly a composer, and that's what I kind of brought to the film. We wanted to, because we were mostly two for a lot of the shootings, because we did this on a very reduced budget, and so kind of bringing our own skills and our craft to the film, we wanted to really kind of find the symbiosis between the audio and the visual. And so we were talking just as much about the visual as the sound from the very beginning, and we gave equal importance to these two aspects. And so from the very beginning, we also started talking about the music, talking about different influences, and I started composing certain ideas from the first shooting, and then these ideas evolved over time. But we also wanted to really use the soundscape, the music, also as a narrative or tool to really kind of associate certain memories with a particular musical texture and musical feeling, and New York with also its own kind of musical texture and feeling. And then over time, again, these kind of things and sonic atmospheres kind of merging together, because he managed to find a way to kind of bring these two worlds together, and kind of find a certain peace in being away, and being distanced from his family and from his childhood.
And just to add something else, also chronologically, when we were shooting, we first visited Miguel in New York, and then he shared with us all his memories from his childhood. And as Mati says, it's things that he lived 14 years from now today, because of course we shot these things we shot it like three years ago. So
5 years ago.
Yeah. So when he was sharing all these memories from like Zapotitlan, we then we went there and we're trying to look for those memories, because he would describe like very vividly the sounds, the announcements that he would hear, the sounds of the insects, of the rain, how the rain would come to town. So I think we were both of us trying to look for these details that he would talk about. Of course, I grew up there and I could very much relate to what he was saying. But on the other side, Matis had never been in this town, so we kind of merged our views based on what Miguel had told us.
Yeah, it was also the whole conversation going on was trying to find what words or what were the things that should be felt and experienced through his words, and through his voiceovers, through his and also seeing him talk about it, and also sometimes prioritizing the fictional medium recreate some of these memories and to decide to also allow his words to then transform into a cinematic language.
Yeah, I think hearing now like the order of how you all approach that, it really emphasizes some of those moments in my mind even more. And I think there, in general, there's sort of this sense of not complete loss, but sort of the exploration of what it means to not quite have the relationship you thought you would with your parents or your family, and sort of losing that from being in another place. And particularly thinking about the conversations that Miguel has with his sister. And also when he's talking about his grandmother being really his mother. And I think there's a lot of vulnerability from Miguel, and I can sense that there's very clearly a relationship that you all have built with him. And I remember reading in your submission about like you all growing up together, and sort of their being drawn to sort of Miguel and your relationship with him sort of informing the way that you approached the film. So I'd really love to hear you talk about that, like giving Miguel space to really share in the way that he does in the film, because I think there is a distinct vulnerability and honesty that is present throughout it.
Sure. So as we said, I grew up in the same town. Miguel and I, we were childhood friends. And I think at that time, I didn't realize seeing children living with other parents was just daily life. Most of my classmates that's how they would live. And it wasn't until later when I realized how much family separation had shaped life in this town. And then, so it was something that to me was always very personal and very intimate, because I know a lot of people that grew up like this. And I think Miguel had this very unique story, and we lost track of each other for several years. And then when I invited Matis to come to jump on the project, and we traveled to New York to meet him, it was actually the first time I saw him in more than 10 years. And we understood, and we realized how much he had gone through. And it was at that moment we really realized what the film was going to be about. But I think Miguel, being the way he lives, it was difficult for him at some point. Like, I don't think he quite understood like what we were trying to do. In a way, he trusted me fully because we knew from long time ago. My mom was his teacher, and so he would, when he was a child, he would come and spend a lot of time at home. He would be going through the books that we had in my home, like in my house. So like there was this very intimate relationship, and I know in a way he really trusted me in what we were doing. But I think he's extremely introverted person. So it was, I think it was a big effort for him to really open up and share very intimate passages of his life. But also in a way was kind of therapy for him, because it was the opportunity to talk to somebody about things that he has gone through. And we also share the same kind of past. I know him from a long time ago. So I think this helped him a lot to really, it was an opportunity to just reflect about his life and what he has gone through.
I think so. I mean, a big part of what he talked about and we felt like needed to be heard and to kind of give him the space was not only the whole journey from his childhood, but also the moment after he arrived and sort of, you know, arriving at the age of 16, being a child, and then having to become an adult from a day to the next and taking on all these responsibilities. And so that whole journey from the age when he was 16 until now, we're obviously, and you see kind of the last 3-4 years of that evolution, and you see how much he finds himself and kind of finds balance, and it was that journey which we thought was so respectable, so incredible in a way, how much he he did on his own, and the vision and the philosophy that he built, we felt that was something that really needed to be heard and could help a lot of other people. I mean, it helped us in many ways because he brought a lot of light onto that reality, but also more generally onto the relationship to distance, to your family, and all the things he talks about.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of space for him to share the sort of messier feelings about it, that it's not just the positive, like I'm in a different place and I have more access to things, but that there's a resentment almost and like a jealousy of seeing people. Thinking in particular of of the moment when he's working in the pizza parlor and there's all those guys sitting in front of it and he's talking about like, I'm the one working, why am I not in school, why am I not sort of doing these other things that other people are doing. And I think the film really gives space to that, some of the messier sort of feelings of immigration and distance. And I think the last sort of question I want to ask you all is about, you all have already kind of talked about recreating some of the moments, but there are bits of the film that are with people like kids who've been cast as the younger version of Miguel, running around sort of in the caverns in his hometown and places like that. And I'm just really curious about how you all approach that and thinking more about wanting, like you all have already kind of talked about recreating those moments, but I'd love to hear about the sort of more fictional kind of aspects of the film.
Mhm. Yeah, when we went back, and I think something which is characteristic of working like in small towns is that people usually get excited when you come with a project and you invite them to be part of it. And I think ours was different because we didn't have, it was a extremely small budget that we had, so we couldn't offer people like a salary. Even ourselves, we weren't being paid for anything, so the only thing we could offer people is like really to be part of something different than some of them had never seen. Like, so we were just like trying to convince people. Many of them are relatives that I know, friends, childhood friends. Some of the children that we see playing are like the children of some of my classmates. Some of them are family, Miguel's relatives that stayed in the town. So also we're bringing a very intimate story from that town. So I think people were like spontaneously happy and willing to help us. For instance, the little boy that we see running through the fields, it's Miguel's nephew. And people often would tell us that he looks a lot like Miguel when he was that age. So yeah, most of it was just like going around the town, inviting people to be part of the project. And I think in a way for them, they all relate very much to migration, because as I said, it's something that really has shaped this town. So I think it's also, yeah, it was a way to be part of something they can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Matteo said earlier, like we understood very quickly that a lot of the things that we were going to talk about in the film had happened in the past. So it was trying to find ways to recreate them, but also maybe find a certain poetry and like in those moments of play with the children to let things emerge that would also speak to kind of the timeless experiences that are happening there after Miguel left. I mean, and that keep on happening. You know, these fireflies are still there, and they're still, and the kids are still playing with them. And so it was, yeah, trying to reach that poetry, which also speaks more widely and more maybe directly in some way to his experience,
Yeah.
And not just to be kind of illustrative. Yeah.
And I think also in a way I was trying to find my own childhood, because the way Miguel would speak about certain things, I would remember them in the exactly the same way. So in a way I was looking also for those moments that would reflect on what we both lived together when we were younger.
Oh yeah, like both reconstructing both of your sort of memories and experiences. That's really beautiful. I think at this point, I would love to hear if you all are working on anything else next, or if there's anything else that you want people who are watching this Q&A to know about the film.
We have a lot of projects going on. I think I mean, because we need to also, these kind of documentary projects are hard to produce, and so we also have to work on individual projects. I work as a composer and on different projects, and Matteo works as a DOP. Maybe you can talk about a lot of the projects that you're working on now. But we're also writing some short films, going, and then kind of this time going more for a fictional medium. One story which we're trying to develop is concerning the place where I grew up in my village, which is also extremely rural, where the species of wolves has returned for the first time in about 200 years. And so it's kind of really challenging and capsizing, the way that the agricultural traditional way of doing things. And so it kind of creates this, well, speaks of a microcosm, which I think reflects very interestingly with the wider and more global biodiversity challenge, because a lot of the local farmers are wanting to kill the species. And so we're kind of working on the fiction around the arrival of this animal and how it's changing life in the village and changing the imagination around this beast as well.
I think also in a way we love to get inspired by reality. So like, even though we're trying to now develop more fictional projects, I think we still try to get as much as we can inspiration from like real events and things that are happening or we have experienced. So I think in the end, documentary still remains like big part of our interest.
I think that, I mean, the border between fiction and documentary is much more ambiguous than we tend to think. And so we're exploring on this verge between these two worlds, I guess. Or you should talk about some of the projects you're working on as a DOP as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I might be coming to Colorado soon to work on this project by a Belgian director who's shooting a documentary partly in Ukraine, and then another part of it is in the US. It's called Four Brothers, and it's a story of two brothers separated by the conflict in eastern Ukraine. And one of their little brother got adopted by an American family, so he grew up in the US, and it's about really telling the story of these four brothers that have been strongly affected by war. And I've been working on plenty of like small projects here and there, but I think our main goal at some point will be to like be able to get back to directing and keep on working on our own films.
Well, that all sounds really incredible, and I hope I get to see all of it. Thank you so much again for your film, for your work, and for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching. I hope that you tell someone else that you've seen this film and can continue to watch the film for the festival. So thank you all again.